Hi, I'm Jill Maurer, and welcome to Maurer Glass Podcast. Today, we're talking about the Netflix show Atypical. Hello and welcome. So today we are talking about the Netflix show Atypical, and I do want to let you know that there will be spoilers in this podcast. So, spoiler alert, I did record a review of the show on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and just search under Jill Maurer, and the last name, Jill is with a J, and then it's Maurer. You can see my review there. I do love the show, and I do recommend watching it. So
I liked it. Honestly, it's one of those shows where I sort of wish all of the seasons were already out because I want to see how it gets, because they sort of ended it with obviously that big the husband finally figures out, but I want to see like all of the seasons of this.
Yes, I do too. And it's interesting to me because you and I came at this show from very different angles. I mean, not only are we different genders, we're very different ages, but you have no firsthand experience, as far as I'm aware, with autism, and I do have a son with autism, and he's very low functioning autistic. He is nonverbal. He is my angel, and it really not that my other son isn't my angel. He is too, in case he ever listens to this podcast. Of course he is. But it's interesting to me because as an autistic mom, as I call myself, I a lot of times I don't really want to watch shows about autism because I've lived it, and I'm wanting to relax and be entertained, and I can get either triggered by something in a show, or I can just get too analytical about it. I can't let go and just watch the show because it's kind of like how my father was with Top Gun. He was a military fighter pilot and just could not enjoy Top Gun because they did too much wrong. And, I don't know what it was because I love Top Gun too. But I didn't have that with this show. I really enjoyed it.
And that's why I liked it, because I do not have any history with autism of anyone in my family. I've known a few people who had autism, but not living with it, knowing these people on a daily basis. And what I liked about it was it did what my favorite kind of shows and movies do, which is they give you glimpses of things and just show you just how much you don't know about it without really just getting like too caught up in the details.
Yeah. So, and they also didn't take the characters to such an extreme that they weren't believable. As in, a movie like, say, Rain Man. Having a savant quality along with autism, having a savant with anything is very, very rare. And a lot of times, because of the way Hollywood has treated ASD, the autism spectrum disorder, here he is, he's not speaking, he's friendly, he's waving, he does some signing, and they go, okay, well, what is his really special skill? Like, can we put him in front of a piano, or what can he draw a city, or whatever? And that's just not right. The case. And what this show did is, even though it's called Atypical, it is a typical family dealing with, what is an atypical situation, but not an incredibly rare, nobody's ever heard of it situation.
Yeah. So there were a couple of things surprising about the show that I had sort of misconceptions about. I mean, I've known you for a while, so I've gotten a better glimpse of but before I met you, I didn't really have much to go on for autism except with what I saw on TV. So one of the first things that shocked me was just how high he really is. Sam, the main character, really is high functioning.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. Like, he can converse. He understands at times when he's upset someone. He sometimes doesn't know why or exactly what he did, but he's and he's got like a day job. He has to deal with customers sometimes. So I was surprised with how high functioning you can be and still be on the spectrum.
Yes. So he probably has a diagnosis of Asperger's, which is on the spectrum of autism, and it is that more higher functioning. And they can be even more higher functioning, even although he's very high functioning. So Asperger's, the way that you would have seen it in real life before even there was a diagnosis, it would be sort of the scientist, kind of that mad scientist character, where they're smart and they talk and they know a lot of things, usually about one subject. It's not usually broad. It's usually they're very good at one subject, but they really have trouble with social interactions, and they often don't understand why what they've said upsets you. And it truly is not that they don't care. A lot of times they have been represented to be uncaring, and that isn't it. It's that they're oblivious. They don't want to hurt you. They really do get hurt, and they don't want to hurt you, but they don't understand how they did hurt you. And also, one of the challenges with growing up with Asperger's and with raising somebody with Asperger's, not that I've done that, is that they don't see it coming. By the time they see that you're being mean to them, they're already, they may already be in some serious danger. One of the things that I really liked about the show, because my son is nonverbal, and of course the issues we dealt with were much different than the issues dealt with here, but they did address this notion of there will be a weird behavior, and it's explained. For example, when Sam is sitting on the bus and he sits very awkwardly where he won't put his back against the seat, if he didn't speak, you'd just be going, lean back, relax, and you have no idea why he won't do that. But he is able to explain it. And that's nice.
I like that, because sometimes it was like narration, but they presented it early on as he does have sessions with his therapist, and these are when these things come out. So for the rest of the show, you just sort of accept this is him explaining, and then they sort of go in and out where not all of that stuff he's saying to her. A lot of it he's just saying to us or just thinking out loud. Right. And that I really liked, because some of the things he said, you were just like, that's brilliant.
Right.
I've never
It's a completely different perspective, and that's very interesting, right? And also we'll take things very literally.
There were some parts that I had a connection with, and it's the idea of the obsessions that he has. Because I don't think you have to have autism to be obsessive. There are things that I really like, that I'm really, really into, and I can talk about until the cows come home. And for him to have that same thing, to be like, he talks about it consistently. Like for him, it's anything involving, was it Antarctica? Anything involving Antarctica, he loves. He will pull up stats, he'll pull up facts about it, and he'll somehow. What I loved about the show is sometimes he would bring up a fact about like an Arctic fox or something like that somehow had a connection to what was going on. So you could it was almost like he was sort of understanding what was going on based on what he knew about.
Right. And what happens is when you say you have some of these same characteristics, that's what autism is. There's almost nothing that is unique to a person with autism. Even like the self-stimulatory behavior that he has, where he flicks the rubber band, people will tap their foot to rev themselves up, or they have calming things that they do for themselves. It could be anything from taking a deep breath or exhaling a lot, or we just have all of these little tendencies. And what happens is one of the reasons when you're diagnosed with autism, no one person can do it. It has to be now, things may have changed, but when my son was younger, it had to be a panel of people. It's a medical doctor, a psychologist, it's several people, because what it is taking certain characteristics to an extreme is what autism is. It's not like diabetes or something where your pancreas just doesn't work and you can test for that. This is typical behaviors taken, if they're taken to a certain extreme, then we label that as autism. And then that's why autism itself is a spectrum. And even having raised a child with autism, you can see another child with autism, and you just, like, I'll sometimes not even recognize their self-stimulatory behavior. I remember I was watching one child, and he was waving this flag, and the mother was going, "Oh, no, no, don't let him wave the flag. He waves everything. And I'm thinking, well, this is perfectly normal behavior. My child would never pick up a flag and wave it. So, they say that if you've seen one person with autism, you've seen one person with autism. You don't know that much about them. One of the things that I really connected with was how much the family centered around the autism and how much they each adapted to it and rebelled against it and circled around it, which is common in families.
They said it in a way that it really hit me, where they said, autism didn't happen. One person was sort of implying that autism happened to him, and then someone else was saying that no, it happened to us, or it's something that we together are dealing with. It's not one person, it's all of us that are involved. And it was really heavy, because I remember the other time you were talking, you had mentioned that there's a certain point where you say we can let this govern our lives, or we can say this is a situation, we're all on our own pathway and we're not going to let this control our lives.
Yes, I did that. I remember the day that I did it, and it was just an epiphany for me that I wanted to make sure that my son reached his own potential, that he led the best life that he could lead, and that he reached his own potential. But also I realized that we had the ranking of what was happening in our world was misplaced. Everything did center around the autism. And I realized that I had 2 boys who were individuals. That was first. There was me as an individual. That was second for me. And then there was us as a family. And then there was autism. That I wanted to make sure that I saw my son as a child, as a person first, and as, autistic second, or as having autism, because you really can get wrapped up in it. And this show, a lot of the things where the daughter teases the mother about her calendar, there's a history of that. She had to, you're stepping into the show when things are in a steady state. Everything is, she even says, we've been going 2 months now and we haven't had a meltdown. Things are pretty good. She didn't ask for this, but she's had to manage it, and she does, and she's got her calendar. And you just don't realize, unless you've lived it, just how much planning and contingency planning and scheduling and organization, and down to what they can eat, because certain things can trigger people, what they wear. There's the one scene where the sister, I don't remember her name, but the sister is offered a scholarship at a school, and she's very excited, as she should be. And the mother's first reaction is, you can't go, you can't do this, because your role is to make sure that he is okay at school. And that seems really cold to
that was a tough one for me, because that was the point when the show went from, oh, this is whimsical, this is how it sort of is, here's a look, to, oh, lives are seriously being affected by this. Because they had built up, she was getting recruited, she was clearly the best runner on her track team, and it was the first time that her life had been that I had seen. I'm sure it happened before. It's the first time that her life had been directly affected by it. That was a tough scene.
Yeah, and I can assure you that her whole life has been affected by it. And that was a conscious decision I made as well, that I was going to make sure that there were times that my other son and I did things on our own, that his whole life wasn't limited by what we couldn't do with his brother. But I also had luxuries that a lot of people don't have. It's really, meaning I had somebody who could take care of my autistic son. And, if those of you out there, I do say autistic son. I know some people take issue with that. They'll say they're not autistic, there's somebody with autism.
They had that in the show, right?
Probably. There's this whole language, and there are camps, and different people will come after you, and it is why a lot of times I did not go to the support groups, because they weren't supportive to me. They were a lot of times they were difficult. But my grandmother had diabetes, and she didn't say I'm a person with diabetes. She would say I'm diabetic. I just I don't feel any negative toward that. Of course, my son is very low functioning. It would take you, you know, people people sometimes say that, oh, the only reason that autism isn't an epidemic, more people are diagnosed, and I don't know if more people are diagnosed at all, or not. But what I can tell you is that a 5-year-old spending 2 minutes with my son could let you know that there is something up, and that may be why I have a little different feeling about it. I don't know, because I don't have the other perspective, but I am not offended by autistic.
Which again, the show did really, really well. I mean, again, I have no, other than what I see on TV and film, I had no prior understanding of autism, and I loved the scene when the dad, who, to that point, they obviously made it clear that he was a little bit more distant and detached from the situation than the mother. There was probably some instances where, and then they disclosed that he had left at some point. But when he finally decided, I will go back to one of those meetings with you, he goes there and he gets his head bitten off by the leader of the group, because he says, my autistic child, we say children with autism. You see him trying, at that point that he's not being malicious, but you just see how incompatible he is with the situation.
And how naturally the mother can translate for him, because she has been through that drill, and yes, it's a shame, and it does happen. The other thing that happens is, I haven't looked up the statistics in a while, but I am divorced, and the statistic is that 70% of couples who have an autistic child divorce, and that statistic is the same as if the child were to die. It's 70% with the death of a child. It is very, very straining on a marriage. And I'm not saying that I liked her. I'm not saying that she would be the person I would choose to go have drinks with. But I did understand her, and I understood what she was going through. And you also find out that she was a relatively shallow person in high school. She wasn't, she didn't have a great deal of depth, and she was thrown into this. And it's not easy. So while I'm not going to defend a lot of her actions, I do understand them. She's done a lot to really, truly try and guide her son and protect him and arm him for life, and to handle life. This whole thing of dating and how she's resisting it, and she goes to the therapist who's encouraging him to date, and the mother has a lot of anxiety about that. It seems so wrong to a lot of people, but I can really understand her anxiety. He's going to do something new. He's going to get his heart broken, and he's not going to understand that we don't have a plan for that. Why would you set him up to be hurt? And so again, my son is very low functioning, but there are two things going on there. And one of them is just this natural thing that mothers have of sometimes their children grow before they're ready. They're a little afraid of it. And I can remember with my typical son, my other son, he often would say, "Mom, I'm old enough to do this. I'm ready." And it was me. I was the one who wasn't ready. I was all nervous about kindergarten, and I'm crying, and he's waving goodbye, and it's some of that, but it's also this thing where you've been doing something a certain way, and where typical children grow quickly and the stages go quickly, that doesn't always happen with people with autism. With children with autism, you get into, these things are extended. It probably took me, I mentioned in the video, about a year to teach him to put on a sock. You have to point your foot and kind of get it. There's a lot to putting on a sock when you have to break it down. It probably took about 3 months to teach him to put his seatbelt on. And these are major successes when they happen, but you can kind of get extended where you do things the same way for a long time because that's necessary. And I remember taking him bowling, and we were in a lane next to a bowling geek, and you know a bowling geek. They're there, they're practicing, they have things on their wrist, they have 18 balls. I don't know
They have
why.
a favorite lane.
Right. And he's over there and he's throwing them and he's doing different things and he's setting things. I don't know. He's doing his whole thing. And, we're flinging the ball down the lane, and my son, who is probably, I don't know, 12, 13 at this point, he's gripping the ball with two hands and standing there and, kind of taking the ball to the side and then throwing it down the lane, and we're cheering and all of that. And the man comes over and clearly the man clearly knows. He may not know that my son has autism, but he knows there's something wrong with him. He's not speaking, he's behaving a little weirdly, he's odd. He just walks over, and I'm standing next to my son, and he looks at me and he says, "This boy can throw a bowling ball properly." And he just sort of body blocked me, and he hands the ball to my son, and he grabs his hand and he says, "Put that finger there, that finger there, that finger there," and he guided him to throw the ball properly. And I'll be damned if that child didn't throw that ball properly from then on. I mean, it's, sometimes we just don't see it, that they're ready for the next step, where
Wow.
a bystander will.
That's awesome.
So
I don't know what's going on here, but he can do this correctly. If he's here in my bowling alley,
right.
He's gonna throw this ball properly.
Lady, the problem isn't with him.
Yeah.
The problem is with you.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take this bull by the horns and you can get out of my way. And it really it was great. I mean, to this day he would probably be throwing the ball. Now, I will confess that we did it that way for a good long time, but occasionally he would let go of the ball on the backswing. Mm-hmm. And so we've had to modify it a little bit. He still puts his fingers in the ball, in the holes, but then we have him use his left hand to brace it a little bit when he goes back and then throw it, just so that he doesn't let go. Because even when he did, he was as surprised as the rest of it. When he went backwards, he was not doing it intentionally. And I'm not sure was clear on why that was happening, mm-hmm. but there were things that they did very, very well. There were a lot of clues that they didn't express exactly, especially into the mother and into the family, where if you've lived it, you can see deeper and you can really see that that they know about this. And I gave the example in the YouTube video about the box, and when she asks for that box to be handed to her, and how much I knew about that box. There were things though that were not realistic. And I also think that is okay in movies, or movies and TV, because you don't expect everything to be exactly realistic all the time in telling a story like this. And one example I can give you is when he has the crisis on that city bus. The odds of them really knowing that bus driver, of that bus driver being able to get everybody off the bus, get the parents there. As the parent of a son with autism, I know just how wrong that could have gone. And there is a fear that we live with, not only that the person may do something wrong and that they might have that they might be personally hurt because of it, but they really may be physically hurt because of it. And my son should never be alone. He's so very low functioning that he'll never be alone. But you worry about him getting away, or him, where he is in a situation where he's alone, and what would happen to him then. And I can remember, because he doesn't speak, there are different methods of communication for somebody who doesn't speak, and for him it is signing. And he's not fluent in signing, but he does have several signs and will sign his name. And I remember that the school he was in, they were saying, well, we want to teach him, rather than signing his name, that if somebody asks him his name, he reaches in his pocket and he hands an ID to somebody. So like if the police or somebody were to ask him his name, he could present ID. And the mother in me said, absolutely not. Now, he was 13 or 14 when they were saying this. Absolutely not. I do not want him to be in a situation where he could be acting weird, maybe even to the untrained eye, erratically and dangerous, even though I know that he's not dangerous. But, it could appear that way. And when they ask him his name, if they haven't worked out that he doesn't speak, or I just don't want him going into his pocket. It could look like he was going for a weapon or for a gun. And I could see that even then. And that's that mother's fear. No, I want him to sign. And if they don't understand the sign, I don't care that they don't understand the sign. What I want them to understand is that he is trying to comply, trying to communicate, and that something should trigger in their mind going, okay, I'm not dealing with a typical situation here. Maybe I should call somebody, or
Yeah.
something.
One of my professors, he had this expression of, when he was talking about writing a screenplay or writing TV shows, my favorite analogy he used was, he said, everyone wants to pull a fire alarm. No one wants to get wet.
Yeah.
So he was talking about how sometimes so Atypical, what you were just describing was, they have the bus driver, they have the guy that knows about it. The show wants to show you a situation where, oh, he's not at home, he's not safe, but there's obviously real world implications. The bus driver doesn't know who he is, but they want you to focus on this part. They want you to be able to pull the fire alarm. So I think as they start doing more shows about it, they may start showing that side, but I like that they give you just enough to understand this universe and maybe even want more. Like the first question I had was, well, if you didn't know the bus driver, how do you as a mother deal with that if you don't know the bus driver?
It's terrifying. But what that scene also did was it showed that the mother was right, that things can go wrong. It showed the father, even though he was starting to develop this bond with his son, it did show him, wait a minute, there is a lot she has dealt with that I didn't fully comprehend and didn't understand. Like, the father was helpless in this situation, and the mother was a fish in water. This is what she knows, this is what she feared, and this is what she is going to go in and deal with it. Because it is always a lot of times left up to the mom to make it all right again. And there's a reason that she's shouting and complaining and that she has her calendar, because she doesn't want this situation to happen. And people want to push him, and you know what? It's going to happen. And so she's really just trying to protect him. And it's something that not only do I understand, but I think that almost every mom can understand. Some of my favorite things about the show, two things that come to mind. One was that dance and the way that it was done, where, originally it was done for Sam, that his girlfriend comes up with this plan where he can dance without hearing any noise, and everybody else can, put on their headsets and be involved and hear this band. But what was so wonderful about it is that's the kind of dance I would love too. That's the kind of bar I would want to go into. Mm-hmm. And what I loved was what started as a compensation for one person ended up being a magical scenario that everybody truly appreciated. When they went in, they just...
That was the most intimate prom I've ever seen portrayed on any show or TV.
Absolutely.
Ever.
You could have a conversation with the person next to you while watching a lot of people enjoy the dancing, and there was a beauty and a romance to and sort of a mystical world where it was happening in silence. Mm-hmm. And you knew that you were observing and that you could join when you were ready. It really demonstrated that if you like designing anything, sometimes your inspiration comes from the most unexpected places, and they really created a magical moment. I did love it. Of course, my favorite scene, and I say of course because I think it's your favorite scene too.
I honestly, as objective as my film degree wants me to be, I feel like if that's not your favorite scene, there's something wrong with you.
It was hysterical. And of course we're talking about when the girlfriend pulls out her switchblade, which why she has a switchblade is beyond me.
Oh, she prepped. She prepped for this performance.
Oh, yes. She pulls out the switchblade and in front of everybody slits the throat of the larger than life size penguin that represents all that Sam could have had.
The entire series, they had kept one consistent tone, and that tone was that Sam loves anything penguin, Antarctic. So she slits the throat of the thing he cares about the most, and while it's happening, while the rest of us are like, no, don't do that, that's sad. You see the dad, and you hear the dad in the background like, no, don't do that. Sam just goes, he just stares at his friend and goes, oh, you would have loved that. And he goes, yep. He's just completely...
Yes. It was this graphic representation of the loss of all that he could have had if he had not wronged her.
Right.
I loved it.
When it comes to a twist in a TV show or a movie, there are two types. The most popular type is, I call it a torpedo. It's, isn't this cool? You didn't know this was going on the entire time, and then at the end,
it was under the surface.
It's against you. It's
yeah.
I tricked you. You couldn't see it. The other kind, which is much more rare and much more beautiful when you pull it off, is the planting a seed. You drop something in the beginning, you cover it up, you forget about it, you don't even see it, and then it blossoms. And this show did it with that prom, in that the entire series, every single episode, they were saying two things. One, you don't quite understand how autism works. Here's how it really works. And number two, this kid really likes Antarctica, cold, tundras. He really likes it. Those are the two things that were consistent the entire time. By the time we get to the last episode, they finally decide to have this prom where it's his universe. It's both the other students at the school as well as us are now finally after being annoyed by his obsession, finally step into his world. It's this really crazy symbol. It's this crazy twist where at the end we finally get to step into that world that he lives in every day. And the fact that they used a prom to show it, to justify it, is insane.
And just that scene, the one scene that just sticks with me, and I don't know if this is the mom talking. I don't know, but I think so. This scene where he is dancing and he is happy and he's never been able to dance before, and it's because of the music, in a group. And he is so integrated into the joy of the whole moment. And he doesn't need the headphones. Everybody else has the headphones, but that's all he needed, was just for that sound to be gone. And he is absolutely just indistinguishable from the rest of the crowd, other than he doesn't have the headphones on. And so it's almost like everybody else is having to adapt. That's their, handicap device, if you will.
He likes people. It's just the extra sensations he doesn't like. And
a lot of people with autism are not asocial. So one of the things that I will say is people will use the word antisocial, and I just want to be clear here that antisocial means that you are against society. So antisocial people are the people who want to harm society. A lot of them are in prison, and it's a term that's used incorrectly a lot of times with autism. The correct term is asocial, and asocial means that you just don't care about being social, or you just don't care to be integrated with society. That's the term. But in fact, many people with autism are not asocial. They do want to be social, they just don't know how. Or they don't know how to integrate and how to communicate and how to be social. But they really do want to be.
Oh, he was a typical teenage boy in every regards except the autism. He was starting to get into girls. He liked hanging out with his friends. Mm-hmm. He liked his family. There was just, the differences were very small. I mean, obviously not small, but he loves his turtle. And I don't mean small differences as in they're not important. I mean small differences as in if you take away the autism, he's a normal kid.
I've always said that with my son, even with all of his oddities, because he does have some interesting repetitive behaviors sometimes, he has some very interesting behaviors. If he only spoke, that would be it. If he just spoke and nothing else changed, he'd fit into my family just fine. I mean, we are an odd lot. You know, we've got, seriously, he would be fine.
What is it about autism? Now that they've sort of introduced us to the universe of autism, what is it that you're hoping in later seasons they maybe go into, show, or, you know, even just sort of explore a little bit more?
Okay, so I don't know the answer, and that is one of the things that they represented a lot that I really liked. You know, the whole fact that there's this subculture with autism where, you know, people can sort of attack each other, and you have to be kind of right. They've shown us how kind of protective and scared the mother is. They've shown us how the family revolves around this, and how the daughter is also very much affected, and her life potentially could be limited by this. You know, one of the big things they're going to answer is they're going to answer how it goes when the father and the mother face the fact that she's had an affair. And so part of that affair, and I'm not defending her in any way, but to understand why she had it, there are several reasons. And one is that nobody sees her as a person. You know, so even the daughter will berate her for her calendar and write things on her calendar and joke about the calendar. And, you know, the husband has actually left her in the past. She doesn't trust him, and he's saying, your life has to be more than just about autism. It's time that you figure that out. Well, she doesn't know who she is. So she has no idea who she is. For this Sam is what, 17, 18? For 17 or 18 years, I mean, every mother goes through this to some effect, but she really doesn't know who she is. And so that's the thing that I'm hoping that will come out, is that she is able to, what I call, put autism in its place. So when I did that hierarchy and said autism is going to be after all of us and after us as a family, I called it putting autism in its place. And I hope she's able to do that and really discover who she is, and flourish, and be somebody not only that we all like, but that she likes. She doesn't like herself. She doesn't like that she went and did this, but she, you know, here was this man who knew nothing about her and who she could just be a woman with. Now she realizes that this is a very shallow relationship and it does nothing for her, and she walks away from it. That isn't enough. She realizes that isn't enough. But there was this, you know, this escape. It was this escape, and I hope that she is able to find who she really is. That's one of the things. And of course they're going to explore this marriage, because a lot of people can look at this and say there's nothing wrong with the father. He's a total saint. And I'm really glad that they did talk about him leaving and coming back, because that's a complicated issue. And I understand his place too, where what some people say, and I know there will be people who take offense to this, but when you have a child who's diagnosed with autism in this way, it is a death of sorts. And what it is it is a death of the future that you had envisioned. And that's really what he went through. When he says, I thought I was going to, you know, I don't remember his exact words, but I thought I was going to sit with my son and I was going to talk about football and we were going to go to games and, you know, whatever it is he thought they were going to do, that future died in his mind. And he was dealing with something very different and is now figuring out how to be the father to his son, and to find a place where they connect. And I hope that grows and flourishes. And I also hope that the daughter is able to lead her own life. It will be interesting to see how her life progresses and where she goes. Mm-hmm. And I really like the character that is her boyfriend. I really like that character. And part of the reason, this is a mom again, where the greatest fear, our greatest fear, and very few people understand this. So as the mother to my typical child, you know, I hate that word typical, but my other child, one of my greatest fear is that he would die before I do. That would be my worst nightmare. So as a mother, that would be the worst thing that could happen. Now, as the mother of a son with autism, it gets a lot more complicated because, yes, that would be the worst thing, but there is this enormous fear of how on earth you have this fear that nobody could love this child and now this man like I love this man. There are so many things that he does that are so crazy and so weird and so bizarre that the fear is that nobody else could love him in this way and could really take care of him. And so the big fear is, how do I care for this person beyond my own life? And that is terrifying because it is the way you want it to be. You want to outlive your child. And you don't know how to keep taking care of them after that happens. And it is this fear that very, very few people can understand. And so what we do is we look to his peers. And I am looking to his sister. What I've always told my other son is, you do not have to care for your brother. You have to oversee the care of your brother. And I really think that this young man, I have every confidence that this young woman will be able to oversee the care of her brother. But I also think that this young man that she is currently dating could be a serious ally in that. Like, I really like the way that he treats Sam. So, I'm interested.
He approaches it he's a strange character because it's either you have people who know about autism, they know what to say, what to do, how to act, or you have people who are completely oblivious who are going to say and do the wrong things. He's this really cool combination of, I don't know what's going on. How can I help though? Which is very rare. We're talking about a Venn diagram center that's so thin with every disorder. But it's good that she has him now.
And it does happen, and I have been shocked whenever I see it. And it does happen. There was, I was so sad to see him leave, but there was a man that I met just because he was an antiques dealer. He had antiques, and I went in there one time with my son, and both of my sons, and he absolutely was just as calm and happy as he could be. And he had a couple of dogs there who loved my son as well. And we would honestly going there on a regular rotation. And I brought once my house was full of antiques, I would bring other people there. It does happen. It's rare. And when it does, I will tell you that my son, when he confronted you, especially by surprise, you got right to the core of somebody just as quickly as you could. And that kind of person is rare and is such a gem, because what you know is that at his core, he is calm and he is stable and he is okay, because you can't throw him off balance. Another thing I'll say about the mother, and I talk about the mother a lot because I do, feel this connection with her just because we were both in the same situation. But what I would find is that people they would say one of two things to me. You are such a saint. You are such an angel. I don't know how you deal with this. You're, superior to all other beings. You are amazing. Okay, that's not true. And then the other thing that I would hear would be, you're the devil. You're not doing things the way that I would do them. You have no idea what you're doing with this. You're not, But the truth is, you're just a person who has been dealt a hand that you have to figure out how to deal with. And it's hard. And so you're just a person trying to do the best you can with the hand that you've been dealt. And that's what every parent, I would guess, of every special needs child is doing. And it's not just special needs. There's all kinds of things. Everybody has been dealt something. Now, before I say this, I want you to know that if I could pull a trigger, if I could pull a switch and he did not have autism, I would pull that switch. If he could speak, if he could have, be independent, I would sacrifice almost anything for that. What I will say is there is a positive side to almost everything. This experience has made me a better person. Now, I would rather be, a maniacal bitch and he have a better life, he
Right.
have a great life. But there are positive things. He's introduced me to certain things, and sometimes people say, oh, how could he ever have a purpose? How could he ever? Well, I will tell you that he has inspired other people. So I can tell you that he has inspired 3 people to become physicians. He has inspired at least 2 people who knew they were going to be dentists to specialize in special needs dentistry. He's been a good ambassador for autism, and inspired people to be of service in that area. And so I can't say that I've done anything with that level of purpose. It's we all have our contribution.
And there are probably almost unquantifiable benefits too. For instance, your other son is probably more thoughtful than he ever would have been in any other situation. He's probably a natural leader. He's probably the first person that would keep his cool in a situation where someone's having really getting to the bottom of what's wrong, as opposed to getting rid of the problem that's, inconveniencing his own life.
That is absolutely true. The one thing that I would hear more than anything when he spent the night at somebody's house or he spent any time over at a friend's house was that, I want you to know that he is welcome back to our home at any time, because he is a fabulous influence on my child. And I would hear that constantly. The other thing, I can give you a very graphic depiction of what he did. So he was maybe, I'm going to say, around 8 or 9. And we were at a Cracker Barrel and we're having to wait. It's a situation where there's a long line and, we put our name in and we're having to wait. And there was a child in a wheelchair, and not just a wheelchair, but an automated wheelchair. So this child does not even have the physical ability to take his arms and push his own wheelchair. He's a little, he's not sitting up straight, he's leaning back, he's a little tilted in the wheelchair. I don't know what his issue was, but he was about the same age as my son. And so my son walks right up to him in the wheelchair, just the parents are just looking at him. And so my son says to him, "Do you speak?" And the kid says, "Yes, I speak." And my son says, "But you can't run." And the child says, "No, I can't run." And my son says, "Can you move your hands?" And the child says, "I can move this hand." And my son put his little finger in the air and he goes, "Checkers." And the child says, "Yes, I can play checkers." And so, it's a Cracker Barrel. There's checkers there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so they go and they play checkers. And, it's just...
It's the really thoughtful version of, yeah, so what are you into?
Right. He's like...
What's your thing?
Yeah, and the parents are looking at me like, when they're asking, "Do you speak?" The parents are looking at me kind of like, well, that's obnoxious, but I'm not saying anything. I'm just watching.
They're looking at it like that game Guess Who. Like, can you do this? No. Can you do this?
But when they realized, when he put his little finger in the air and said checkers, both of the parents looked really surprised and they were all looking for that checkerboard. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's our discussion on Atypical. And I must say that I really enjoyed the show. And I think that it is just a great show. Whether you have any experience with autism or not, I think standing on its own, it's a great show. And if you are a parent who's been nervous about watching it, because I do know how that feels as well, I will tell you that I personally really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I do have a YouTube channel and I did do a review of the show. It will be nowhere near as in-depth as this was, of course, but it is on YouTube and you can just go there and search on Jill Maurer. That's it for this episode, and I will see you next time on Maurer Glass.